So our last speaker this, I guess, afternoon now is Lisa Lurie. She is the Executive Director of the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County, and she'll be speaking about enhancing steelhead habitat with large wood in the upper Zayante Creek. Lisa began her role as Executive Director of the RCD in 2018 after 5 years working with the organization. During that time, she played a key leadership role in developing many of the RCD's core programs and innovative projects related to stewardship and agriculture. Prior to joining the RCD, Lisa managed the agricultural water quality partnerships and programs for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Lisa has degrees in biology and environmental studies from the University of Washington and a master's in environmental management from Duke University. Having worked on watershed management projects with communities in the Pacific Northwest, the Ecuadorian Andes, and the coastal North Carolina, Lisa is happy to have set down her roots in her new home of Santa Cruz. Thank you. All right, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you very much, and I have the distinct honor of carrying us through to the end of our agenda today, so thank you all for staying with us. Also want to make sure everyone knows that this is kind of the tee up to our field tour, which will follow immediately after today to see all these projects in action. So I encourage you all to join us for that. At the Resource Conservation District, every project that we do getting conservation on the ground is through partnership, and this project was no exception. This has been a huge collaborative effort between a number of different agencies, landowners at the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, as well as the City of Santa Cruz, as well as members of our project team. If folks in the room who have had a hand in this project could just put a hand up so we can have a sign of all those in the room who've been a part of it. Hopefully they'll be joining us on the tour as well to contribute to the conversation. So I am here today to give an overview of a project that has recently been implemented here in the upper Zayante Creek to address some of the points that Kristen raised in terms of steelhead and coho recovery and habitat enhancements in this important tributary of the San Lorenzo. So since 1994, Zayante Creek has consistently been possessing some of the highest juvenile steelhead densities among the tributaries of the San Lorenzo River, and it's currently a priority area for coho recovery. So this project works to improve the complexity and habitat for steelhead and coho recovery by reintroducing large trees into the creek to mimic the historic conditions that have been absent over time. Large wood in streams is really critical for good stream function, and it creates pools, refuge areas, and important habitat for fish to hide, as well as reducing channel downtime. So just to orient us here to the project location, this is Upper Zayante Creek, just up the road from where we are currently. And since 1957, this has been identified as an important tributary in terms of its resources for steelhead. So looking backwards in time at some of what the creek used to look like and some of the changes that have gotten us to where we are today, here's a photo looking back to about 1910. And as you can see, that historically the stream has really had a lot of complexity, a lot of large wood naturally occurring in the stream, larger floodplain connectivity, and over time, over the last century, those conditions have been affected by things like road development, the clearing of large wood from the channel, loss of that floodplain connectivity. And what this has meant really is a loss of a key function of the system to store and sort sediment that's delivered down the stream. Due to a lack of profile variability, we see a diminished channel habitat complexity, shallower pools, and also resulting in more incising of the channel due to that lack of floodplain connectivity. So that then leads us to some of the need for this project. Zayante Creek has been identified as a target recovery area from the NOAA Fisheries 2012 recovery plan. As I mentioned, it's a high resource area for steelhead. And at the same time, Zayante has been identified as the tributary watershed with the highest impact of loading of sediment to the system. And as we know, the San Lorenzo River is impaired due to the high amounts of sediments in the water body itself. So the source of those sediments, it's been accelerated in many areas of this tributary, as I mentioned, due to road construction, removal of native vegetation, and some stream bank erosion. And also in some areas, the loss of the large wood itself from the stream channel has reduced the complexity and has induced this channel downcutting. So the need to reintroduce streamwood to address that primary limiting factor in regard to escape cover for juveniles in the San Lorenzo watershed, as well as creating refuge habitat. Zayante Creek, because of these more recent developments, has been characterized as a bowling alley due to the lack of structure and channel complexity. And NOAA Fisheries also identified the lack of large wood as the major contributor to the lower shelter values estimated in the watershed. So here's just summarizing again some of the primary limiting factor for salmonids, from the lack of deep pools and escape cover, secondary limiting factors, and then just to note that the availability of spawning habitat was not considered the limiting factor for Zayante, hence the focus on the large wood. So back in 2014, a number of different folks here in the room, the County of Santa Cruz, the RCD, with support from the watershed stewards, did a lot of creek walking, looking at potential restoration sites along Zayante Creek, identifying this 1 mile stretch where the project was ultimately implemented on land that was shared between the two landowners that I mentioned, the San Lorenzo Valley Water District and the City of Santa Cruz. The project was also identified as a high priority through what's called the San Lorenzo River 2025 Partnership, which is bringing together a lot of the different stakeholders to identify specific conservation actions, as well as the Integrated Watershed Restoration Program, which the RCD facilitates, bringing together the different agencies similarly to identify highest conservation actions to lead to the results that we're looking for. We've received funding from the Coastal Conservancy for project design, and then a grant from the State Water Resources Control Board and EPA for implementing the project. So, just this past fall, the project was constructed. Those of you in the neighborhood may have seen signs of that activity, and the monitoring and evaluation is currently underway and will continue for the next 3 to 5 years. Here's a close-up of the stream reaches. So the properties outlined in purple are the city properties, and the orange here is San Lorenzo Valley Water District. So we have the lower half, the city property, and then there's a little pocket there. Previous conditions of the streams and the city portions, you can see the confined channel and some of the long and shallower pools, short riffles. On the San Lorenzo Valley Water District property, it was less confined by the road, but we had a fair amount of incising, and then the corner pools and longer riffles. So to then make a plan and a design to bring large wood back into the system, we took an engineered approach working with Waterways Consulting. We've got Matt Weld, our project engineer, here today, who will also be out in the field with us on our field tour to answer more specific questions. Ultimately, we installed 18 large wood structures along this 1 mile segment, and each structure was really designed with site-specific characteristics, the constraints and opportunities in mind. In general, there were 4 different types of enhancements that were installed, and I'm going to give just a brief overview of those four with some photos to give you a sense of it, and then hopefully you can join us out in the field to take a look for yourself. So the type 1 enhancements, these were on the downstream-most portions of the project site. They were installed in sites that were at higher risk, adjacent to Ziente Road, but where heavy access equipment was possible, and the location where the channel geometry generally provided an opportunity for pool development. So some of the key features of this type of enhancement was a real focus on engineering them to reduce the chance of log mobility due to the proximity of the road, and excavating the structures into the stream bank. So with these, you'll see there's a lot of work that is not visible to the eye currently, but Matt will be able to talk us through it. Then additional logs were added on top and attached and ballasted to boulders for that increased stability. Here's some photos of the type 1 enhancements. This is the site we're going to go out and look at today. We saw a lot of photos earlier today of those charismatic amphibians and birds and insects from in our watershed. Think of this as our charismatic mega streamwood here. And so this is, we'll see this in the field, but there's, as I was mentioned, a lot of the engineering here kind of below the surface, as well as the additional trees and key feature of root wads here at these sites. Then we have the type 2 enhancements. These were in sites where generally we were able to harvest the logs on site and or the root wads. So it enabled us to have longer pieces of wood. Again, we were able to access with heavy equipment. And the channel geometry allowed for a portion of the logs to be placed above the flood water elevation to counteract the buoyancy. So again, we have bolting and anchoring of the logs to existing live trees, and typically the root wads were placed below the high water line. We have 7 of these installed. So here's just a picture here. You can see high level of complexity and material added to the sites there. Another site, just giving you a couple views to see you've got the root wads here, a large amount of material ballasting. All right, the type 3 enhancements, we have, again, most of the wood harvested on the property, but we're having to be hauled to the structure site, so these took a fair amount of more effort to get the material there. We had, let's see, typically it also required at least one large locally sourced tree. The trees were ballasted to boulders or chained to logs. And again, a portion of the structure is actually buried into the stream bank. We integrated entire trees, including the branches, you can see here. That increases the complexity and the ability of these structures to recruit more wood for a greater benefit and complexity. Here's some pictures there of those systems. This is a Site 27 on the Water District property, which, time permitting, we're also going to take a look at this site as well. And you've got a couple of different angles here. Again, you can see the amount of branches in addition to the trees there. And then the fourth type of enhancement, these were in sites that were really difficult to access. So we weren't able to use heavy equipment and were more difficult to access. We're not going to be able to see them today for that reason. But it's where there were optimal conditions and large trees available on site to be utilized. Here you can see these are the type 4 enhancements. So this is where there's, rather than attaching to boulders or keying in or ballasting, the trees were kind of dropped in clusters to provide that stabilizing effect. So some of the outcomes that we're looking for from these projects are first, improving the storage and sorting of coarse bed load, and creating deeper pools and increase hyperbaric flow for increasing that habitat. In addition to the actual large wood that we placed in the stream, the idea is to help accumulate naturally supplied wood on those installed structures. That's going to vary based on the site and the structure that was installed. So this will lead to increased habitat complexity and high flow refuge habitat for steelhead and coho. And eventually these structures will degrade over time. Well, we expect a kind of a 30-year useful life, but as the wood degrades, so will the structures themselves. I don't know how much time we have to get into the monitoring and evaluation, but okay, got a few minutes. So we're doing the photo monitoring, the pre and post implementation, looking at revegetation at the project sites. We're doing the annual reporting to the permitting agencies, and then looking at effectiveness in terms of, one, first characterizing what was ultimately installed at the sites, evaluating changes in stream bed condition and form over time, and then using the biological monitoring program that Kristen outlined earlier, we'll be able to look at impacts in terms of salmonid density over time. And then also working using the California Rapid Assessment Method, which is a method for evaluating overall riparian condition. That's a assessment that we did, again, pre and we'll be doing post project implementation. And that's been conducted in collaboration with the State Water Board and the Central Coast Wetlands Group and our watershed stewards. So with that, that gives you just a very coarse overview, and really I think the story speaks for itself when you can get out into the creek and see it with us. So for those who are able to join us immediately following today, we're going to be meeting just outside of the building here. For those who haven't already, we just ask you to sign a waiver, and then we'll be loading up to go take a look at a few sites. So with that, again, I just want to thank all of our partners who really made this project happen. It's been a labor of love for many of you in the room, and we're grateful to have helped see it through to completion, see it on the ground. Thanks.